1 minute until showtime. Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. This is Trucking with Authority. I'm your host, Kenny Long, and for the next hour, consider me your navigator on your journey to success in business, especially the trucking business. We can talk about anything here on the show tonight, from getting started as a driver, brand new to the industry, leasing your first truck, becoming an owner-operator, leasing to a carrier, switching carriers, getting your own authority, pulling freight under your own MC number, becoming a broker, getting brokerage authority, sales, negotiations, dealing with load boards, approaching direct customers, dealing with FMCSA, record keeping, insurance requirements, you name it. This is the show for you. If you have any questions or comments, please call the number at the bottom of your screen, 917-889-9924. It is the last show of the year, December 18th, 2018. And what a year it has been. We want to talk about that tonight. What have you seen this year? What have you experienced? What have you learned? What could you have done better? And what do you expect to see next year? And how will you do better next year than you did this year? That should always be the goal, to always improve and become better and better as you go through each stage, each year in your life, each year in your business. How can you become better at it? That's what this show is all about tonight. Again, number is scrolling at the bottom of the screen, 917-889-9924. If you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear what you experienced this year. This show is all about you. We are cutting it exactly, without fail. We will be done tonight at promptly at 8 o'clock. We may even cut early because I am otherwise engaged. One of my drivers, and I'm going to dedicate this show to him tonight, one of my drivers, Jason Dirksen, is getting married tonight. I could not be there in person, but I'm looking forward to watching the live stream. So in exactly 1 hour, well, less than 1 hour, we will be, I'm going to cut out just so I can go watch that stream. So that being said, that means you all have exactly 1 hour to get your phone calls in. We have people calling in now. We're streaming live on YouTube, and we're in all of the Facebook groups. Check us out on Facebook, Trucking with Authority, or the You Drive You group. We have some new features. I'm trying to improve the show as we go. Check the bottom of the screen. Let me know what you think about this new little ticker here. I've got some rate and lane information on there. We've got some weather information on there. Let me know what you think. Leave comments below. Like it. Subscribe to the channel. Let me know how can we do better. I'm always trying to improve for you guys. Let's see what we can do to improve the industry together. So, and I am most definitely cutting the show early tonight. Even if we're in the middle of a call, no matter what it is, I must be at this other location tonight at 8 o'clock. So, again, I'm putting that out there because if you have anything you'd like to add to the show tonight, you got to call in early. Call now, 917-889-9924. As always, I take the phone calls first. If I have time toward the end of the show, I'll get to the comments from the stream. But phone calls must come first. So, It has been an amazing year. Absolutely amazing year. And with an amazing year, we have a lot to talk about. So, not sure what's going on here. Today is December 18th, and I would ask you all to think back exactly 1 year ago today. What happened on December 18th, 2017? You guessed it, one of the biggest changes ever in the trucking industry, the official ELD mandate took effect exactly 1 year ago. We are 1 full year in. So that has got my vote for the number one thing of the year. What has changed? Now, there was a lot that came along with that, a lot of predictions, a lot of expectations. I'm not sure how much of any of it came true, to be honest. There was a lot of scare tactics going on. Let's be honest, it hasn't changed much. It has given us leverage. Those of us that have chose to use the leverage, it has, in my opinion, over the past year, we have seen some major improvements in the industry, and I will credit the ELD mandate to that. I think that that has given us some big improvements. We are finally tracking our time at shippers and receivers. We're tracking locations. We're tracking data that we never tracked before, all because of the ELDs, which now the majority of the industry has now implemented it in some form or another. Most of the industry is still on the old AOBR model. There's a handful out there that are on paper, whether they're in a glider or a pre-2000 model year truck or model engine year rather truck. There are still some drivers out there in the exempted trucks, and everybody currently is exempted from a true ELD as long as they had the AOBR in place, the automatic onboard recorder. So, have we seen the full effect of the ELD yet? And the answer is no. It's going to get a little bit stricter here 1 year from now. So we have one more year, 2019, where we will see some more changes. We have one more year of this ability to do some edits, some of the ELDs or the AOBR equipment. Everybody's calling them ELDs, but they are not, or they are not in that mode yet. So there will be a time period where carriers will start to switch over. All it is simply is an electronic, it's a software issue. Simply switching a few modes here and there will make it fully ELD compliant. Now, one of the big ones is most of the AOBRs are set on some type of distance or speed threshold before they switch into the driving mode. An ELD, by the letter of the law, must switch at 5 miles per hour, within 5 miles per hour. Some will switch immediately. To comply, they will switch as soon as that truck starts to roll an inch forward. Some may have a grace period of 5 miles per hour, so maybe if you're just inching up from that fuel island, it won't switch you into the drive mode. But this is going to be a huge wake-up call for a lot of people. 1 year from now, we are going to switch into full ELD mode, and those type of exemptions, whether it's some drivers can drive a mile or two before it kicks them into the drive mode, and it may retroactively do that for them, or they can drive up to 15 miles per hour. Some might even be faster than that. 1 year from now, all of those types of exemptions go away. We have 1 year left. But everybody is currently on some type of an electronic logging device of some sort, AOBR or a true ELD. Everybody's there. Has it changed the industry this year? We're exactly 1 year in. So although it started 2017, I thought it was worthy of talking about it for 2018 because we are one official full year in. Next week will be Christmas Day. One week exactly from today will be Christmas Day. We are a year in. What have we seen? The big predictions with the ELD would be huge high rate spikes. Did we see that? Absolutely, we saw that. Absolutely we did. Was it attributed directly to the ELD? I can't say that it was. Not entirely. There were a lot of other things in play that worked into that. Let's go on to some of the other things that we saw this past year. Record rates. And I think most people are going to remember 2018 as the extreme high rates. If you go back, I've been doing this show since 2014. And what prompted me to start this show in 2014, it was September 2014, so we're just over 4 years in now. What prompted it was the record high rates that we saw in 2014. If you go back and look at my videos, the Trucking with Authority show from 2014, 15, 16, and 17, for 4 full years practically, and even most of early 2018, I referenced the rates that we saw in 2014 as a benchmark for what a high rate should be. 2018 was the first time that we exceeded the 2014 rates. So that's what we saw in 2018 with rates. And was all of that attributed to the ELD? Again, I cannot say that it was. There were other things in play. There were other reasons that these things happened. But we saw record rates. We saw rates that were bumping $3 a mile on average nationwide across the board for a certain time period. Early this year, for reefers, we were in the $280 to $290 per mile and above range on average nationwide, which is outrageously high compared to what we've seen historically. So the record rates will be talked about for a long time. I'll be referencing them, and what we're starting to see are these trends of between 4 to 6 years, these rate flops. It has a lot to do with politics. It has a lot to do with other issues in the trucking industry itself, and we'll come back and talk about some of the rates that we saw. Again, numbers at the bottom of the screen, 917-889-9924. Please call it. If you are watching the stream, I know I'm fun to look at. I know I'm good looking, right? I know you guys are staring at me, but please, if you're driving, put the phones down and call the number 917-889-9924. It's safer. You can interact with the show. It's a much better way. That's why I keep doing the phone calls. It's a lot better way. You can listen live while you're driving. We have several callers on the line, but I know since I started streaming live, and the more I add to the video effects and so forth, the more people are flocking to the live stream versus call-ins. But I know, because people have admitted it to me, I know people are watching my videos while they're driving, and please don't. Please don't. Please call the number. That's why it's there. You can listen live. It's not going to put you on the air immediately. You'll have to press number 1 if you want to add anything. And if that's the case, I would love to hear your stories about how the ELD mandate affected you and the record rates. Because of the record rates, we saw added capacity. Huge push for more trucks on the market. More trucks hitting the road. A lot of new drivers saw those record rates and they flocked to the industry. I know this because I have some owner-operators that went out and bought a truck that were from other industries and decided that because of the amazing rates that they were seeing, it was time to get back in the truck and go over the road. That's what they did. So they bought a truck. We have seen wait lists on equipment. We have seen new truck manufacturers backed up by months. New trailer manufacturers backed up by months. If you want a brand new truck or trailer, you are going to be on a wait list unless you happen to find one that just slipped through the cracks and made it to the dealer lot, which is going to be stock generic specs. If you want anything custom ordered, you are on a wait list. We're going to come back to that because we're starting to see some changes there. Those are the top 3 that we are seeing. And finally, what we saw a lot of, what changed part of the ELD mandate was politics. We're seeing a big push. We're seeing a lot of protests, a lot of pushback against the regulations. We're seeing a lot of different moves on the political arena. That was huge for 2018 as well. Those are some of the top things that I took notice of this year. What did you notice? Again, call the number at the bottom of the screen, 917-889-9924. There are a lot of callers on the line right now, and if you're listening, go ahead and press number 1. I would love to hear your stories about this. What are you seeing? What was your most notable memory, event, what have you, from 2018? Now, I put these 4 things here on the screen, this side, these 4 things on the screen, because to me, these were the biggest effects and issues that we faced for 2018. That being said, these issues change the industry in such a way that we are going to see effects from these things in 2019. Again, I already mentioned, end of 2019, the ELD mandate takes full effect, and we are switching. The AOBR mode, rather, is no longer. We are switching to the full ELD mode. How will that change things? The record rates. We saw huge record rates. I mean, breaking barriers that we didn't even know existed, just through the roof rates. That added to the capacity. We saw people come into the industry trying to get rich quick. Huge increase in capacity. We saw the political issues that we dealt with, whether it was the protests for against the ELDs, people trying to shut down freeways in Washington, D.C. We saw, in many cases, I think a huge black eye on the industry because of those types of things, because they were not well managed, not well thought out, and some bad actors jumped in and tried to ruin it for everybody. I think some of those issues could have been very productive, but what we got out of it were screenshots of very nasty, negative things that completely confirm most of the stereotypes of the industry, which sets us back. It was a backwards move. And we still have people talking about more protests and more acts against these ELDs and the mandates and regulations against us. The other one was the tariffs, which is a political move by the White House. We have placed tariffs. We have done away with NAFTA, and some of that has been renegotiated. But we saw a big push in rates. Again, all this stuff is tied together. We saw a big push in rates in the first half of 2018. That was when we saw the record rates because of the upcoming and impending tariffs that hit mid-year. They took effect, and there was a big push by all the importers and exporters to get their products in or out before the tariffs took hold, to try to save money when they could. That may have played a part in why we saw the record rates. Those tariffs early on, coupled with the ELD mandate, coupled with a huge booming economy, which I didn't even put on here because that kind of falls under some of this other, the politics and things. Huge booming economy, GDP growth at exponential rates, which is an awesome, fantastic sign. Unemployment numbers in other industries across the nation lower than they've been in over 40 years, which that means consumer spending should be high. We should be moving a lot of freight. We're moving a big volume. And we saw the effects of that in the first half of the year, especially with the tariffs and everybody pushing to get these goods in or out before these restrictions took hold. So what we're seeing now are some of the effects of that. We're seeing some of the downturn in rates. If you look at the ticker tape that I put at the bottom of the screen, and again, let me know what you think about that, it mentions that December 2018 may be the first year in recent history that we are going to see stagnant rates, basically just level with October and November coming into the fourth quarter, which is unprecedented. There is a big push every year for the holiday rush, of course. You have the package delivery companies making a big push with the Amazons, the online retail, which if you look back at other industries, we've had a lot of brick and mortar stores go completely out of business or this close to bankruptcy because the online space has taken hold. Even the biggest retailer in the world, which is still Walmart, although closely challenged by Amazon, the biggest retailer in the world now is pushing more and more toward online sales to compete with their number 2 competitor there, which is Amazon. Number 1 competitor, the number 2 spot is Amazon. So online sales is a huge, huge movement. We're still moving those goods from ports. A lot of that is coming in from overseas, China mainly. Coming into the ports, going to distribution centers, so we still have truckload moves there, and then package delivery companies take it and do the final mile. It is a big shift in what we've seen in the past, because while we had a lot of port to distribution center, then distribution center to brick and mortar location, and then from the brick and mortar location where people, the consumers bought the products, we're starting to see a shift where we're taking one leg of that out or shifting it from truckload to LTL or parcel delivery, which is a completely different animal. So now it's from the ports or from the manufacturer to the distribution center, from the distribution center going directly to a package delivery to make final mile. We're cutting out one leg of the shipping process, which is changing the industry. It is a big change. Some of these record rates that we're seeing are why. So, let's see. And I want to get to some of these comments because, again, with all of the added capacity that we saw this year, a lot of that happened because of the good rates, and it happened in a short period of time. So, added capacity. We added, between April 2018 and October 2018, when I read the article, we added 4% capacity. 4% is huge. So I mentioned that 2014 was the last time we saw these amazing booming rates. And that was attributed to only a 2 to 3% capacity crunch. But now, in about a 6-month time period, and we still have trucks on a waiting list, still new trucks, new trailers coming in, we still are seeing that adding 4% plus in a 6-month time period is a huge, huge hit to the industry. It has saturated the industry with new trucks, new drivers, and there are more trucks on the road now than ever. That has, with increased rates, has come increased pay. Now, you can turn your nose up to that all you want. A lot of people don't want to believe that, but we have seen pay increases across the board for almost every mega carrier out there. They've increased benefits, they've increased per mile pay, they've increased everything, recruiting bonuses to try to put more butts in seats, and it's working. As I mentioned, we are seeing people come from other industries and staying in these trucks. They're making more money than they've ever dreamed of in some of these positions. But the question is, 2019, will that turn? What are we learning from that? Supply and demand runs the industry. We are seeing great growth with GDP. We're seeing a lot of industry still manufacturing, a lot more happening. There's a lot of shipping going on. But because of the big push in the first half of the year because of the tariffs, a lot of that tapered off in the last half of the year. And it'll probably plateau through 2019. That is my expectation. And I don't have a crystal ball, but with the level capacity and the hugely inflated, the level demand, the level, the shipping, truck loads out there, and the hugely inflated capacity, we are probably going to see a very, very, very tough 2019. For a lot of people that got started in this industry or decided to become an owner-operator for the first time or just step out of their comfort zone into a self-dispatched job or role, and for the first time started to see what the actual line haul rates were versus what the carriers were offering them previously, may have gotten accustomed to the record high rates we saw in 2018. That's a very, very bad thing because the record high rates were just that, record highs. They were far from the norm. They were not the averages by any way, shape, or form. What is average these days? Well, with the ELD mandate, with the capacity, with the different political things that we have going on in the industry, what is average? It's anybody's guess right now. Supply and demand is the driving factor in the market, no matter if it's direct shipper, contract freight shipper to carrier, or if it's shipper to broker to carrier, whatever the case may be, spot market, contract, supply and demand always runs the market. And the supply of trucks is at an all-time high right now. That's a bad thing if you're chasing rates. So anybody that is out there that does not have established relationships, anybody that is running wild, as I call it, bouncing all over the country chasing rates, I urge you now to fall back on some relationships. Build relationships if you don't have them. Develop lanes that you like. Find the brokers and shippers that have freight in and out of the locations you like to run. Running wild for 2019 could be a very, very difficult business model if you don't have the relationships to make that work. I'm going to read some of these comments because some of them are playing off of some of the things I've just said. It's been a crazy year for me. This is William says this. It's been a crazy year for me. I started my authority in June. A drastic rate change happened in the first month in my state. After Florence, Hurricane Florence that is, it just kept dropping. Absolutely. From June is probably one of the hardest times to get started in the industry at any level. There are two periods that the rates always tend to drop. One is the beginning of the first quarter. So expect that for 2019. There's always the big rush, the end of year push to get freight off the books, to clean the slate for the new year coming in, empty the warehouses for new product, whatever the case may be. Of course, the holiday rush and all the other things that play into that. There's always a big push at the end of the fourth quarter of every single year, although this year has been a weak push. We've seen just stagnant rates since October. There has not been a huge spike. So that being said, I would expect that there's not going to be a big push in the first quarter at all. Every year in first quarter, we're going to see things bottom out. So it's about the second week of January, rates are going to drop to their very trendy, every year trend, typical lows, wintertime lows. And it'll stay that way until springtime hits, which typically starts to happen toward the end of March and into April. I always say when you start to see sod moving on the flatbeds and you start to see hazmat trucks out there because they're moving pool chemicals, that's the sign that spring has sprung, and that's when rates will start picking up. That happens, obviously, toward the end of April. May and June are usually premium months. And July, after the 4th of July, we see a lot of manufacturers shut down for retooling in the summer. That's just been a traditional thing since the beginning of time. We see a lot of slowdown with workers, with consumer, word I'm looking for, consumer confidence. We see buying slow down. So shipping slows down typically in July. So getting started in December or getting started in June are tough because you get started and immediately go into that slump. In this year, what we saw were these hurricanes rolling in. Now, in the past, going back, looking and analyzing the data, in the past, we see hurricanes roll in, usually August, September timeframe is when the worst ones hit. And typically they hit in Florida, maybe the Gulf states or Texas area, and causes major, major damage. But what happens in those areas is there is nothing shipping out of Florida, very little shipping out of the Gulf states, New Orleans area and Mississippi and so forth. There is some shipping out of Houston area, which oftentimes storms hit, but it's not nearly as much as other areas such as the Carolinas where it hit this year. That was a big hit. That took close to 10% of the shipping, the truckload freight, off of the market for about a 2 solid week period before anything fired back up, and it slowly tapered up, and that is a huge, huge hit. So Florence was a little different this year because the storms oftentimes lead to FEMA relief loads and increased demand for the trucks. But here, that increased demand was offset by the decrease in all the storm-affected shippers that stopped shipping the freight. Again, close to 10% of the demand was pulled out of the market, only replaced with the trickle of the FEMA relief stuff, and it did not recover quickly. So that was a big change in the market. Of course, that also happened just after some of the tariffs took effect, which we already mentioned. Sorry, let me get back on track here. We've got people having a different side conversation in the feed as well. And he said after Florence, it just kept dropping. And again, the tariffs took effect. But he says it just kept dropping. And it really didn't. It did come back up. It just didn't come back to the levels that we saw pre-June. So we were bumping records. Now, let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about the average rates, what average rates might be. 2014, van rates bumped to the $2.10 per mile range. We saw the same type of thing happen. Drivers went out, bought trucks, sucked in new blood from other industries to get back behind the steering wheel, go over the road. A lot of trucks hit the market, hit the streets rather in 2014. 2015, that extra capacity flooded the market, dropped rates. For all of 2015, 2016, and 2017, rates did not surpass the $2 per mile mark at all until roughly October timeframe 2017, as we started to go into the peak that we saw in 2018. But 2015, 16, and 17, so almost 3 full years, we did not see van rates anywhere near what we are even seeing now. A lot of people are complaining about the stagnant rates that we're seeing now and having a rough time of it. For 3 full years, we did not get anywhere close to these averages. The volumes, any of it. We are currently in a much better situation than we were then. I remember begging and hoping and wishing for $2 plus per mile freight on the van market again, and it didn't happen. I didn't know that it ever would happen until the end, very, very end of 2017 and then in 2018. We stayed above the $2 per mile mark for the entire year for 2018, which was somewhat surprising. It was very, very strong. But what were some of the lows that we saw in that 3-year period? We were operating most of that time just above cost, maybe 10 to 20 cents above what most people would consider cost. A lot of people right now, when I talk to them, say their cost is above what our average rates were for close to 3 years. And if that's the case, and if we drop back to what those rates were or anywhere near that, those will be some of the first trucks that we'll see for sale in 2019 and 2020. So that should be a bit of a warning for you. Some of the lowest rates we saw during that time period, and it was 2016, 2017. We were in the average rate area nationwide with everything, average between $1.60, $1.70. At one point, I believe we got into the mid $1.50 something per mile range, but we were in that $6.60 to $1.70 range for several months in a row. There are some drivers right now that cannot afford their expenses at that rate. That needs to be addressed. If that is you, that needs to be addressed because those could be some of the rates that we see in the next couple of years. I don't have a crystal ball, but it definitely could happen. There are operations out there leasing trucks on at roughly 95 to $1. There are some might even be in 90 cents plus fuel surcharge. That puts them in the $1.30 to $1.40 range somewhere. it can be done at those rates. You can turn a profit at those rates. That should be your target rate to get your cost, your actual cost, below that cost per mile. You should be able to operate at a rate that low, stay in business, and still be somewhat profitable. If your cost is above that, you may have a very hard time of it going forward. Let's see, still going here. Okay, so here we have a little bit of a discussion here. When in a market where the carrier sets the rates, why chase rates? I'm going to elaborate on that. Let me read a couple more here. The biggest change I've noticed on the rate confirmations from brokers. Okay, so this is William Hepler again. When in a market where the carrier sets the rates, why chase rates? And he also says, in our area has the same shipping out. There is too many drivers shipping in, so more drivers flooding our regular market. And that's the supply and demand rule. Now, there's more to supply and demand than just how many trucks are in an area. In addition to how many trucks are in an area, the commodity that is being shipped plays a huge role in what the shipper is willing to pay to get it moved. For example, if it's mulch, I don't care if there are no trucks in the area and there's 1,000 loads of mulch, and there's only one truck. Mulch is just not that valuable and probably not worth spending a whole lot of money to get it moved. So mulch usually won't pay all that well. Versus if it is some kind of super high dollar electronics that needs high security, special blankets and pad wrap and all kinds of things, and there are only a few trucks, but that's got to go, and it's got to be at a certain show that goes on at 8 p.m. tomorrow, and it's got to be on a team truck right now to absolutely make it there. Well, guess what? That commodity has to go, and they are willing to pay more for that commodity. If those two shipments were on the same dock next to each other, what do you think would pay more? The mulch or the high dollar electronics that are time sensitive and got to go now? So the commodity absolutely does play a role in what the shipping rates will be. That needs to be a factor in the areas you go. So even if you find yourself, let's say, for example, you look and you see that the market is very, very tight. There are no trucks in the middle of Wyoming, for example, and there's 1,000 loads in the middle of Wyoming. Well, I ask you, how many manufacturers, how many high dollar, high value shipments are coming out of the middle of Wyoming? It's more than likely some of that mined goods, some type of limestone or something. And same thing, say Salt Lake City area. Now there are food and there's other products, but the big exporters from those cities are going to be, I can think of Morton Salt coming out of Salt Lake City. They mine a lot of salt out of that area. There are other things such as copper coming out of that area. Copper will absolutely pay better. It's higher dollar value, and it needs to be to whatever refinery or manufacturer or so forth, it has to get there. Versus you could probably wait a little while on salt because there's salt mines everywhere. Okay, so those types of things need to play a factor in the rates you're demanding, the areas you go, and the way you dispatch yourself. That's why rates tend to be better in the Midwest, where a lot of manufacturing is, even when capacity is a little looser there than it might be out west in the middle of the plain states, for example, and so forth. There's more manufacturing. That stuff is time sensitive. It's higher value loads. It cannot wait. It's got a date stamp on it. Whatever the case may be, those loads will pay more. So supply and demand rules the market. But it's not just supply and demand of the trucks itself. It's supply and demand of the commodity. How bad do they want that product to get shipped? That's the demand for it. How bad do they need it where it's going? That's the demand. So when in a market where the carrier sets the rates, why chase rates? Well, the question there is, how did you end up in a market where the carrier sets the rates? And if you're in that market, again, Excuse me. If you're in one of those markets, how will you get out? Where will you go? You need to chase the rate to figure out where the best place to be is next. So dispatch yourself into areas where you will be able to get those steady, consistent loads. And remember, the tortoise won the race. Yes, it's great to get one of those, score those high dollar super loads, but consistency every week pays off. I went back, we had a dedicated run last year. Our dedicated truck was not our highest grossing truck in any single week ever. They were not. We had every single week in our fleet of, we were bouncing around, between 15 and 22 trucks back and forth. Somewhere in there, there was always a truck or two or three that did better. So this truck was never on the leaderboard, ever. But at the end of the year, they grossed almost $100,000 more than a truck that was running the spot market. Now, that truck had the opportunity to have that run. They didn't want to because they tasted it, the blood in the water. They tasted it. They wanted those weeks where they could go out there and score $10,000 in a week. And they did it. But they didn't do it consistently because it's nearly impossible if you're running wild to be consistently on the leaderboard in rates. Keep that in mind going into 2019. The tortoise wins the race because consistency pays off. So, another comment on YouTube. How many miles a year do you expect to run to make it profitable at $1.40 per mile? And I would love to say that I would love to go out and get $3 a mile freight every time I booked a truck. Every single time, $4 or $5 a mile, I would love to. And I ask for that. I would love to ask for it. But if the market doesn't support it, it doesn't matter. So how many miles do you have to run to be profitable at $1.40? I would say as many as it takes. If you're in the trucking business, you've got to do what it takes. If you can only get $1.40 because there are 1,000 other trucks competing with you, then $1.40 might be all you're ever going to get. Maybe you decide to hang up your keys. Maybe you decide to sell the truck, get out of the industry. A lot of people will. That is what happens with supply and demand. That's the natural effect. I hope a lot of people do. I hope a lot of people hang up the keys. Because the more people we get back out of the industry, the faster we're going to see rates start going back up because supply and demand will take effect. Less trucks, higher rates. More trucks, lower rates. That's just how it works. When we had extremely high rates earlier, 2018, we had people coming in from the woodwork to buy a truck and get behind the wheel and make more money than they ever had before. But when rates drop down to almost unsustainable rates, those same drivers are going to scatter. They're going to sell their trucks, let the banks have them back. We will see, just like we saw in 2015, after 2014's rate spike and all the new drivers that came in, 2015 was the best year. 2015 and 16 was the best year, the best time frame if you wanted to buy some used equipment. Because there was a lot of premium, slightly used equipment on the market and the markets were flooded. Remember that supply and demand too. There were a lot of used trucks out there available for purchase at awesome prices because a lot of drivers couldn't cut it at $1.40 a mile, which absolutely could happen. There will be a lot of drivers out there that cannot sustain their business at $1.40 or whatever the low rate ends up being, whatever the averages end up being. They will not be able to sustain their market or their business. And they will have to get out. They will have to cash in their chips or let the bank whatever it is, they're done. They're going out of business. And that's what's supposed to happen. That's the natural order of things. Benjamin Duke says, with equipment purchase price, insurance, maintenance, mechanic services, and tires have increased a conservative 20%, does your cost still fall in $1.10 to $1.25? Does that include driver's pay? No, that would not include driver's pay. On average. Now, if you are leased to a carrier and the carrier covers a big chunk of that cost. The biggest cost is insurance. If the carrier is covering your insurance cost, if the carrier is covering some of your other incidentals, such as load boards, and maybe you get huge discounts with your fuel card, maybe you get all those types of things. If the carrier is carrying some of that burden and taking some of that financial burden off of your plate, then you may be able to get down under that mark. Again, when I mentioned that it was $1.30 to $1.40, those are drivers that are running for a carrier probably at $90 to $1 a mile and plus fuel surcharge, but they're leased to a carrier that pretty much takes care of everything for them. They're basically a glorified company driver at that point. The carrier does everything. So they do take a lot of those expenses off. And if you have your own authority and you have all of those expenses on your own, obviously $1.40 may be underneath your cost. That being said, there are a lot of people out here that have paid for trucks and have focused hard on fuel economy and have kept their costs down very, very low. If you are driving a brand new long-nosed truck and like to drive 80 miles an hour everywhere you go, and you don't pay attention to where you buy fuel, and you have high insurance costs, and you have everything else, and I have seen people whose actual numbers could be $2 a mile or more as actual cost. There are people out there. They will not be around for much longer. I can assure you of that, unless they get that under control quickly, which in some cases may be impossible because they've made some bad decisions that they cannot dig themselves out of that hole. North Carolina to California is already below $1.40 per mile, and it should be. That's one of the cheapest lanes in the country. It always has been. Everything off the East Coast, California, because West Coast right now is one of the hot markets. Everything on the West Coast has been great. Florida to California has always been the cheapest. All the way up through the Carolinas has always been cheap. $1.40 per mile is probably, I wouldn't necessarily take that, but I could understand that would not be a horrible rate right now. That seems somewhat reasonable. I wouldn't go directly to California if I was trying to get there. I would take a tri-haul. So from California from North Carolina rather, maybe to Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, somewhere over there. From there, maybe to Texas, and from Texas to California, or that you get my point. I wouldn't take a straight shot line haul there because you're going to take it in the pants if you do. But there are carriers that make their money on the eastbound haul, and they can afford to, or they could even deadhead all the way back if they needed to. There are some drivers that only want to do long miles. So you could do these 250, 300, 400, 500 mile runs, but there are some drivers that just want to book the 3,000 miles and go and not have to think about it for the rest of the week. There are definitely those out there, and they're happy with $1.40 a mile one way, and maybe they get $2 a mile the other way, and the average works out to be somewhere in the $1.70 range, and they're happy with that. All right, I am looking at the clock here, and I just want to leave. This is the last show of the year. And I am going to wrap things up early because I do need to get to this other event that I've got planned tonight. 2018 was awesome. I hope that you all took advantage of it, grew your business, put as much in the bank as you possibly could. Early this year, I gave everybody the advice not to go out, and I say this often, don't go out and buy a new car and a Harley and a house and all those things, because those rates were not the norm. Those were pad the bank account money. We are approaching the opposite of that. I like to describe the market as a slinky effect. Happens every 5 years. If you take a slinky and you stretch it out and you pinch some of it together on one side and you let it go, you'll see this wave go across. And that wave starts really fast and tight and in the beginning, and it slowly goes down and it stops. You do it again and it does it again. We have that effect with rates in this industry. And right for 2018, we were in that part where we pinched it together. Rates were awesome. We had a lot of stuff going on. Let that go, and it was moving fast, and we had things going. Business was booming. Things were happening. But now we are going to approach the other side of that. that slinky effect is going to turn the other way. And it's going to get a little bit wider, a little bit looser, and move the other direction. And it's still moving fast. Okay? The slinky effect, like I said, it starts moving fast, and it'll continue moving fast and start getting slower as it goes back and forth. It's still going to move fast, and I expect it could, I don't have a crystal ball, but it could drop like a rock and drop overnight. Be prepared for that. Don't park the truck yet. Don't get too worried yet, but be prepared for that. And this is another good one. My equipment is paid off as I persuade my other profession. Should I sell my equipment, focus on my new career, or put a driver in the truck, or keep trucking myself? And then he goes on to say, I usually run the spot market and understand how it works. I do enjoy trucking, but not seeing a solid future in it. Let me know what you think. Okay, so any business is going to have its ups and downs. There is an absolute solid future in trucking. There's always going to be a need for it. But that slinky effect that I just talked about happens in 5-year roughly increments, between 4 to 6 year increments. It was like this 2014, roughly 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years. We're going into 5 years. And it was like this again, going back 2008, 2009. We had a big pinch, and we had a boom in 2006, 7, and it just went back and forth. And it tends to do that every 4 to 6 years. And you got to play the averages. It's going to level out, and you've got to just play the averages. Sometimes you're going to take a loss. You have to look at the bigger picture. And the same goes when you're dispatching yourself on a day-to-day basis. For example, if you dispatch yourself into Florida, you're going to get your $4 a mile in, or whatever you get in. And you might have to deadhead out. And your average is going to be $2 a mile. Or maybe you get $3 in and you look at that $1 a mile freight coming out, and you don't want to take it. You want to deadhead out. That $1 a mile freight could be the one thing that keeps you at that $2 average. If you deadhead out, it's $1.50 a mile average. If you take that $1 a mile, it keeps you at a $2 a mile average. It's the same thing in the big picture. We're going to have these rates like we had this year, where some drivers, I have drivers that are leased to me that made crazy money. I was talking to one earlier that will probably post his numbers on Facebook later. Doctors would be jealous of what this driver made. Lawyers would be jealous of what this driver made. I mean, he did very, very well. And he didn't do anything spectacular to do it. He just worked. He worked hard, but he took advantage of it. Made hay while the sun was shining. We're going into a slower period. He's got that money in the bank, and he knew that things would slow down. So he's ready for this slower period. He's going to keep working. He's going to be consistent. There's always going to be a future in it, but you got to play the highs and lows. The same thing really in any other industry, unless you get trading a dollars for hours kind of a deal. If you go get a job somewhere. And I am going to wrap this up with this last comment here. Oh, and then should I put a driver in the truck? It really depends on your operation. In my opinion, growing a fleet, putting drivers in it could be profitable, but you got to remember that margins in this trucking industry are small, risk is high. And it is one of the highest risk industries to be in. So just understand your market, know your numbers very, very well before you do anything like that. And if you're not ready, don't try to jump into something that you don't fully understand. Maybe it's time to sell the truck if you don't think you can make it. Other than maybe Patriot Star, what carrier pays for an owner-operator insurance? As far as my research has come up, the owner pays all the insurance. Mega carriers like Mercer had discounted insurance. Well, if you sign on to companies like Landstar, Mercer, and most of those, they cover all of the insurance with the exception of your physical damage or bobtail. There are very few, there are a lot of small carriers back charge for insurance. And any carrier that exceeds roughly 15 to 20 trucks that is still back charging for insurance, oftentimes is taking advantage of the owner-operators. Reason being, when you start out new, just to quickly summarize this, when you start out new, you're paying an annual premium for each truck on your policy. And it usually gets that way until you exceed a certain dollar amount of revenue, or you have a certain number of vehicles and a certain number of miles that you drive. Typically, when you get in that 10, 15 truck range, you can move into one of those fleet level policies. When you get on a fleet level policy, you pay by the mile for your insurance, or you pay by the amount of revenue that you do. So a carrier that has 50 or 100 trucks, if they are still charging you a flat weekly fee, if you go home and you take the week off and they still charge you, they are making money off of you on the insurance. There are a lot of semi-small, any carrier under 300 trucks is considered a small carrier. There are a lot of small carriers in the 100 to 200 truck range that are doing that, and they really probably shouldn't be. In my opinion, the carrier should maybe charge a slightly higher percentage like we do at Patriot Star and should pay for the insurance, because there are way too many issues that come up that the owner-operator does not have control over. Only the carrier can make those decisions. So in my opinion, only the carrier should be responsible for paying for that insurance. All right. And so Benjamin says the banner at the bottom is a neat addition. I appreciate that. That was the first comment we had on that. Anybody else that has anything to add about the banner that we put at the bottom, if that's helpful, or if that takes away from the rest of the video, or if that needs to be changed somehow, I would love some feedback. I wanted to give that a shot. I thought that was a cool little addition. Dave, Columbia Glider, Dave recommended I give that a shot, and I want to give him the credit for having me do that. So that being said, everybody, I've got to run. Thank you all for sticking with me for over 4 years now. Thank you for the support. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we will be back stronger than ever in 2019. Thank you all for everything. Remember, as always, dream big, because only your dreams matter. Aim high, because nothing can hold you back from your goals. Strategize a plan, because a plan without strategy is worthless. Earn your success, because you don't deserve it. You've got to earn it. And only you have control. Only you drive you. Have a good night, everybody.